All right, let's get CRUDdy. So about me, my name is J.P. Richardson. I'm born here in Lincoln, Nebraska. I've been writing software for about 15 years now, since I was about 15 years old. I'm, well, not quite 30, but I will be here shortly, unfortunately. So how did I get into JavaScript? About a year and a half ago, I was a big Microsoft .NET fan, which I'm sure a lot of you guys are. And I wrote a lot of code in Rails on the back end. And so in doing that, I would do Rails on the back end, and I would do GWT on the front end, and I would write, .NET, WPF, XAML on the desktop. And over time, I came to, use any technology to avoid JavaScript that I could. In fact, I hated JavaScript. I absolutely hated it. And so I used like GWT, then I used Cappuccino and a bunch of frameworks. And then about a year and a half ago, Microsoft had their Windows 8 build event. Maybe some of you remember it. And so at this Windows 8 build event, what Microsoft did is they pretty much made JavaScript a first-class citizen for developers for Windows apps. And that kind of made me consider, well, okay, that's interesting. And I was looking at Silverlight at the time because I really liked WPF and XAML and that sort of thing. And I was looking at Silverlight, and Microsoft, they pretty much deprecated Silverlight. They took the Silverlight team and they got rid of Silverlight. And so I was really bummed about this. I was like, why would they get rid of Silverlight? It's such a sweet technology. WPF is awesome, blah, blah, blah. And well, they did. So I discovered CoffeeScript and Node.js, and I started writing a bunch of my code in CoffeeScript and Node.js, and I really started to enjoy it. Well, in the Node.js ecosystem, a lot of developers really shun CoffeeScript. And so I started writing a lot of my Node packages in JavaScript. And so over time, I started to really like JavaScript. So I went from hating it to liking it. Now it's my favorite language. Okay, so my objective here is for you to see how productive you can be with Node.js and AngularJS. And so hopefully at the end you'll see that it's actually can be kind of fun. So just to I'm curious, who uses JavaScript or who likes JavaScript? Likes, okay. Does anybody hate JavaScript that's here? Yeah. What are you doing here? So how did I get into Angular? Well, I looked at a bunch of frameworks, Ember, Backbone, Angular, Sprout Core. I looked at a lot of them. And three things stood out for me why I really like Angular. And one of them is that Angular makes it very, very easy to test. It's baked into the framework with the dependency injection, and you'll see in my demo how it all works. When you're writing Angular code, you feel like you're embracing HTML, you're embracing the web way. And in other frameworks, I didn't feel like you're doing that, like Ember. I feel like in Ember, you're writing a lot of JavaScript code out. And I want to write more in a declarative fashion, and so I really appreciate that about Angular. And then data binding. The data binding, the way that it works in Angular, it's a two-way data binding system, and it works really, really well. And so I hope, in the demo, you'll be able to see that. So we're going to briefly talk about REST and CRUD, and that's kind of the lame pun, CRUDdy, CRUD. We're going to talk briefly about REST and CRUD. I'm sure most of you probably understand and know what REST and CRUD means, but just in case you don't, we'll go over that real brief. Then we're going to talk about Node.js and then Angular. So let's get CRUDdy. All right, so if I'm going to create a web app, right, and on the client side, I'm going to have, let's say, an example would be, supercars.com. If they have an API where they want to, store new cars and that sort of thing. So if I'm going to create it on the client side, I'm going to create a JavaScript object, and I'm going to post it to maybe this API endpoint. Oh, I did forget to mention that if you don't know, CRUD stands for create, read, update, delete, REST stands for representational state transfer, and REST typically means, well, it's kind of associated more with HTTP. I won't get into too much of the details there. So you create, you might post to this API endpoint. Read, you would maybe use the HTTP verb get at this endpoint. Update, put, as you can see, it's a pretty similar pattern here. Delete, you'd use the HTTP verb delete. All right, so we're going to do a little role playing here. And we're going to pretend that we are consultants, and this guy right here, he owns a Ferrari dealership, and he reached out to us and he says, hey, I want you guys to build me a quick app so I can host my, put my cars, my Ferraris online, and it just needs to be quick. Something just so I can kind of understand your capabilities and what you guys are capable of. And he wants it tomorrow. So he doesn't expect anything too great, but he just wants to see kind of what we're capable of. And so we are going to deliver on that. So with that being said, let's get in the demo here. All right, go away. All right, as you can see, basic code editor and browser. And so we're going to start with a bare bones directory. Ignore the node modules. What that is an artifact of me screwing up with Git. So just pretend that node modules isn't there. It's not really important. So let's just pretend that we're starting out with .gitignore. The reason I want to do this is because a lot of times when you start out developing, developers will say, hey, go download this seed package here to get you started. And you do it, and you're kind of left wondering, well, what's going on? What do these components do? And so I really wanted to start out from the very beginning so that you can see exactly piece by piece what we're doing. But don't worry, I'm not going to be doing any live coding. We'll just step through here. Okay, so I just added a client directory, server directory, and test directory. Pretty straightforward. A lot of times with Angular, the format that they recommend is a little different. I like to do it this way because it's very clear for any developers that take over your project. They're going to be able to see, oh, okay, obviously if we're in the client directory, we're working on client-side, browser-side stuff. If we're in the server directory, so forth, so on. So let's populate the client-side directory here with just CSS, JS, partials, vendor. Partials, that'll be something where you're going to put in, HTML snippets or templates. Oh, and if there's any questions, if we could hold off until the very end, just since we're kind of short for time, that'd be fantastic. If something's not clear, obviously shout it out to me. Okay, and so the vendor directories, typically where you put like third-party libraries. A lot of times it's called lib. I prefer vendor. All right, moving along. So let's create a simple index.html file. You're probably wondering, okay, so where's the head tag? Where's the HTML tag? Where's the body tag? I am on a crusade to get rid of all of them. You can, if you watch this YouTube video, it's by Paul Irish. I don't know if any of you guys are familiar with Paul Irish. He worked for Google. He's a big front-end guy for JavaScript. And basically, what I found out after watching this video, that you don't need any of that because the HTML5 parser is the same in every single browser. They all have to follow the same spec implementation. So, another thing that I wanted to mention too is that if you don't have to type any of this stuff out, you can go to my GitHub page. If you just Google this right here, all the code is right here, so you can see what's going on as we do this. So, just Google JP Richardson and toxins. It'll come up. So back to the tags. I know it might feel kind of weird at first. You might be like, JP, I don't know if I'm comfortable with that, but give it time. I think you're going to like it. Okay, let's set up a basic Node.js package. And to do that, all we need to do is type in npm init oops, I've got to be able to see this here. So, like this. And what that will do is that will generate a package.json file. Kind of like this. Can you, everybody see this all right? Just want to be sure. OK. And so this package.json, you don't have to remember any of this stuff here. Again, the npm init will do this for you. npm, oh, I should mention, npm is the node package manager if you didn't pick that up. And it'll complain if you don't have a README file. So you're going to want to put a README file. And plus, it's good to have that anyways for a little bit of documentation. And it'll show up on GitHub and on npm's website. And then we have our file server.js. Nothing special. Oftentimes, you'll see it named app.js. Again, I like server.js. So we are going to use Express on the back end on our Node side. And the reason we're going to use Express is because it's probably one of the best Node.js web servers. It's kind of comparable to Python's Flask, Ruby Sinatra, if any of you guys are familiar with those. So that's kind of what Express is like. I'm going to expand this just briefly here so you can see kind of some configuration. Not too important. What's important here is that this client directory is referencing this right here. And then right here, when you get to the base of your URL, you're going to send the index.html, which is this file. That's pretty much all that's important right here. OK, so I originally wanted to run the tests and go through testing on the server side and on the client side. And we're not going to have, I don't think we're going to have a lot of time for actually running the tests, but I can at least kind of show you how they work. So on Node.js, Mocha is the name of the most popular testing framework on Node.js. On the client side, and we'll see a little bit of this later, Jasmine and Testacular is what Angular uses. So we just created right now a server test folder, and it was just a basic test. All it does, it fetches out to the base URL as seen right here, and then verifies that, well, the hello was there, but verifies that the data was there. So the next step, there's a package I really like. It's called Reload. We just installed that, and we put this in our code here. And Reload, basically, as you would expect, when you fire up your server, if there's any changes on the server or any of your code, it just refreshes the browser for you. So you have to keep clicking refresh. That gets kind of annoying. So all you do is, you include it right here, and then just right here. You put in your reference to your HTTP server, and then your Express reference. And then along with Reload, on the server side, you're going to want to use a package called Supervisor. And basically, that monitors the server side of things if things change, and that restarts the server for you. And so to install that, you type npm install -g supervisor. And -g means global. It's going to put it in your global path so that you can access it anywhere. That's typically used for command line type apps. So I already have that installed. Don't need to install it again. OK, let's get started with Angular. So let's go back here, and let's make our change. And so now you can see, pretty straightforward, pretty basic. I've included Angular here. In production, you'd want to use the Google-hosted Angular. But right now, since we're in development, we'll just want to use the one that we have here. And so we have an Angular-specific attribute here called ng-app. And to be fair, some people actually really hate Angular for this reason, and that they feel like it's just polluting your HTML. It's like, get out of my HTML. I don't like you, Angular. Get out. And so, that's why I love Angular. And most developers that love Angular, that's why they love it, is because we can do things like this. And so typically, you're going to see this ng-app up in your HTML tag. And, well, obviously, I don't have an HTML tag, so I put it in my root div tag. So let's fire up a server here, and let's see what this looks like. Okay, I'm in the wrong directory. Okay. Supervisor. This is how you'd start supervisor, HTML, oops, JS. So that's going to say we want to monitor for HTML, JavaScript for changes, and then we're going to call our node server right here, server.js. Okay, and as you'd kind of expect. So then if I type, hello, CodeCamp. Okay, you know, it's pretty much probably what you'd expect to see. And what's going on here is this ng model saying, hey, let's bind some data, name data, and then let's spit it out here. This is a really lame example, just kind of demonstrate some of the two-way binding. And I think it'll become more clear as we progress on, kind of maybe a little bit more how it works. Another thing to point out in Angular is that there's a lot of magic going on. And so if you're a person that doesn't like magic in your frameworks, you're probably going to hate Angular, because there's a lot of magic. And to me personally, it's like, yeah, give me the magic. Give me all the magic you can give me. I mean, I love it, whatever. So, all right. So let's modify the example a little bit more. Let's throw in Bootstrap here to make things a little bit prettier. Here, I'm going to, there. Okay, so real similar example, except now we have our data bound here in the class. So, I mean, you can probably guess if I'm going to type, pretty neat. So it's kind of, so now we've played with Angular a little bit. We're kind of starting to feel the vibe. We kind of like Angular. We're feeling it out. We're thinking that it's something we want to use for our Ferrari dealer. We're thinking that, we can produce a web app for him super quickly and have something for him tomorrow. So we decide to use Angular. So let's show a little bit more detail. Actually, in retrospect, I probably shouldn't have put that, there's a fire sort of thing, in a crowded room. That's just probably not good. So we have a controller, but we're specifying it here, ng controller, my CTRL, and this CTRL suffix is an Angular specific notation, but you don't have to call it this. You can call it whatever you want. And then here's our controller right here. And then what we're doing is we're injecting the scope here. And a scope is essentially just an object that's kind of bound to a code set, typically like a controller. I kind of butchered that explanation, but I think that'll become clearer as we go on too. So yeah, as you can see, I have the error message here, and then it's being displayed right there. Okay, so let's set up our backend here so we can actually have, say, some data for our Ferrari dealer to see what's going on. So I need to view, oops, that's why. Okay. So on the, oops. Sorry guys, okay. Make sure I'm at the right spot here, not ahead. Okay. Okay, so on the server side, we have nothing here, so we're going to create some things. Now we have an API, specifically, let's take a look at this again. The only thing that's changed is of importance is right here. So we've created an API endpoint or a REST endpoint right here called API to cars. And it's going to map to a cars module found, you can see up here, and that's found, I'm going to close this test, found right here, okay? And so pretty straightforward, pretty basic, and here, there's our cars module. And so basically what we're doing, we're creating a fake database. We're using the file system because we don't want to, messing around with any databases right now. You could use Postgres, you could use Mongo, you could use Couch, whatever database you like. But right now we're just going to use the file system just to make it pretty straightforward. And so as you can see, we're reading the file, and then we're storing it in memory, and then whenever this list method is called, we're sending 25 objects to the browser. So let's move along. Let me go over here, and so we can see here, now we've added more endpoints to kind of stick with the CRUD, create, read, update, delete. Oftentimes, this is called show. In fact, most frameworks that generate code for you will call your read method show. And so you can see they're mapped to these API endpoints using HTTP verbs, as kind of described earlier. And so then here in our car server file, here's the implementation. Pretty straightforward. Okay, so let's actually take a look at here, and then let's build our Angular app. Okay, so here's our new index.html file. We've renamed the my app, ng-app, to car app. Yeah, typo there. Don't worry about that. And then we're using ng-view, and that basically what that's going to do is it's going to shoot in the views that Angular has for you into your single-page app. So if we go here, this app.js file is new, just created right now, and it just contains this right here. So we're creating our car app right here on the client. We're setting up a configuration. We're setting up our routes, the base URL of the route, and we're going to load up this partial here as found here. And then if it doesn't match this route, then it needs to redirect. Well, I guess in this case it's not very useful, but when we add more, it'll become a little more useful, this redirect too. So we're creating a service right here. And later in the talk, I actually renamed this to cars service to make it a little bit more clear. But it's called cars right now. And so basically what this does is it uses ng resource, and it automatically maps to the HTTP endpoints as defined over here. It automatically maps to these, with the exception of the update method. For some reason, they don't have that out of the box, and so you have to include that. So, again, this is another case where there's a little bit of magic going on, but you don't have to do it this way, and I'll show later an alternative way of doing it. So, and then when we're hitting the base URL, we are going to load up our list controller as found here. And so, one thing that really tripped me up in Angular, and you're going to see this as we progress as well, with this dependency injection. The order right here of these parameters does not matter. Angular knows if I reverse this and put cars here and I put scope, on the right side, the Angular is going to know it's not going to matter, and you can request other variables to go along with you, and you can use those as well. So then we're going to query the server, the car service, and then we're going to populate cars on the scope. So let's take a look and see what we have so far. Oh, I should show list.html. And so this is the template that actually loads up. And so you can see here some Bootstrap specific class naming here. We're using an Angular specific thing that allows us to loop through the cars, and then for every car we're going to create a row and then spit out the data, so to speak. So there it is. That is, as you can see with just a little bit of code, this data, you probably wonder, well, where's that data coming from? Again, it's coming from the file system, and that data is coming from right here, data.json resources, right there. And so we have kind of a basic 25 items, 25 Ferraris right here, ready to go. So it's starting to look a little bit more like something that we're kind of starting to appreciate. Okay, let's talk briefly about testing in Angular. So when this next step created a bunch of files for us. And these Angular tests, there's two types of Angular tests. There's end-to-end tests, and then there's unit tests. End-to-end tests run on it's kind of tests that that the view would see. And unit tests are more the back-end specific unit testing stuff. And both tests actually do run in the browser. As you can see here, you can configure it using Testacular. Oh, as an aside, Testacular is being renamed because they got a lot of complaints for their name. So they are renaming to Karma. Yeah. So that soon enough, Testacular won't be around. It'll be called Karma. But in the meantime, we're stuck with Testacular, and you can configure your, like I said, Chrome for your end-to-end and unit tests. But we're not going to run those. So okay, so what use is this if we can't, edit a car? We want to be able to edit or update a car, right? So let's do that. So now you can see I added a new route here, and I'm going to load up and I also added a new partial called details.html. And there's actually a new controller as well. So let's just briefly, actually I'll show you the code first. So let's take a look at list.html. As you can see here, there's a giant edit button. Maybe the crazy Ferrari guy, he wants it to be touch enabled. So we're not going to do touch enabled, but we're going to make big buttons to make him happy. So he'll be happy about it being touch enabled. So we put a big button there, and we create a link. And the ID of the car that we're interested in at this moment in time is just the index of the row index plus 1. So we can do that. And then as you can see here, we've added a thing called ngClick and ngClass. And so you might ask, why would you use ngClick? Why wouldn't you just use the JavaScript onClick? Well, again, there's a little Angular magic going on there, but the ngClick really forces you to be limited to the methods and the data on your scope. So that's kind of the benefit of the ngClick. ngClass, so let's take a look. So ngClick select index. So what this does is the $ index will inject the current index of the table row. And so now it's probably a good time to mention that you've seen a lot of these $signs. And I know, Torin, you mentioned that you were excited to get away from $signs. Well, Angular is going to bring you a ton of $signs, so maybe Angular's maybe not for you. But it is, the $signs are required. Angular, if you don't have the $signs there, Angular's going to complain at you. And so the $signs just let you know that this is an Angular-specific thing, that Angular is going to either inject something or something that Angular knows about. So typically stuff that you're creating, you would not prepend a $sign on it. It's just Angular stuff that the framework provides you with, if that makes sense. So let's take a look at the select method right here we just added. So, and basically all it does is the index is coming in, the current index, and we're saving that for later. In retrospect, I probably should have named these things a little bit different to make it a little bit more clear. So like this is the current index coming in from the view, and then we're hooking it onto our scope. And so as you work with Angular, if you're a fan of the MVVM design pattern, and you're a fan of WPF, and you're a fan of XAML, then you'll probably really like Angular because it's going to feel very, very similar to you. So we hit or save the current index to the scope. And then we have this ngClass thing going on over here. So what's that about? So now we're checking if the current index is the same as the index that we saved over here. And so if it is, then we're going to apply the info class. So as you can imagine, this is kind of what happens then. You just, it allows you to select an item. So again, maybe if you're on an iPad or something like that, you can just select an item. So we select an item, and then we can press the edit button, and see that there's our data. It kind of looks a little goofy here, but whatever. You get the point. Whatever, the coolest. So we'll update. There it is. Woo! So let's see what. So we have that. Now you probably notice the dreaded hash URLs. I mean, that bothers some people. It bothers me. I know Nick, it probably bothers you too. Angular has a way to get rid of these. So again, if we select that and we go to edit, what the point of these hash URLs is so that you can have a nice looking URL that is easy to bookmark and SEO for SEO purposes as well. Older browsers need this hash there. Newer browsers have a thing called push state, HTML5 push state, that you don't require you to do that. And so Angular out of the box supports that. And so let's see what that looks like. This is it. One line right here. Well, first we inject the location provider service, and then we set HTML5 true to true. See? And so let's go over here, and if I refresh, there it is. So now.
Compatibility with other browsers.
Yeah, that's a great point. So if you are building an app and you want to support any browser's particular Internet Explorer, 9 or below, I don't think 9 supports push state, I could be wrong, but 9 or below, you're going to not want to use this. But if you're fine with using Internet Explorer 10, Chrome, Firefox, Safari, you're going to be fine with this. Okay, so let's, what good is an app if we can't delete things? So let's see what that looks like. So as you can see, added another button here. And my refresh software is not working. That's okay. So there's our delete button. It's red to let you know danger. So then we've created a new method called delete. We attach that to the scope as seen right here. I'll come back to that in just a second. When I was writing this demo, I realized that I made a boneheaded decision earlier. As you recall, I did the index +1. And if you start deleting items, obviously those IDs that existed before aren't going to exist anymore. And so that's a bug. So then I needed a way to actually save the selected ID of the car that we have selected. And so the way to do that was, in your select function, you just add a new selected ID to the scope, and then you use the current index, and you just grab the ID. And so that works now. And so then on our delete method, it's right here. Pretty straightforward. Oh, you can see the service has been renamed to cars service now to make it a little bit clearer that cars was a little bit ambiguous, but now we know we're using the cars service. It's going to map to the REST endpoint. And so you can pass the parameters here called delete. So let's delete something. We found out from the dealer they're going to delete Sean B anyway, or they're going to fire Sean B anyway. And they don't like yellow, so we're going to delete that. So okay, you see it's gone. But how do you really know it's gone? I mean, am I making it up or what? But you can see here. So you can see this is a git diff of the data JSON file. You can see it actually got propagated to the server. And in our file database, it got deleted. The red means removed. Okay, so now, of course, we're going to want to implement a way to create cars. And so we create a new car, and we also realized that being able to edit or delete when it's not selected is stupid. So we disable the edit and delete button when they're not selected. So let's take a quick look at the list file here. And you can see here that we have we're using ng class again, and the disabled state is being put on the class if the index is less than 0. And then we've created a new URL here. And then we can see right here our route, we created a new route. And we're using a create controller. And we're using, again, we're just going to reuse the details template. And here's our create controller. Pretty straightforward. I just realized I don't know that I've ever pulled up the details HTML template. So a lot of messy Bootstrap notation here of, the kind of how Bootstrap, Twitter Bootstrap. Are you guys familiar with Twitter Bootstrap? Everybody familiar? It's pretty sweet. If you don't use Twitter Bootstrap, you should use Twitter Bootstrap at least to get started, because it helps you make something look really nice quickly, and then you can change things from there. But so you can see here we're binding to the model of all these fields and that sort of thing. And so so we created a car. Yay. I guess it's not really a car name. Lambo. Whatever. 2000, not 99, whatever. Okay, so it got added, but you don't see it just yet. So again, I'll just kind of show. There it is. So it did get added to the server and then saved to the data file. So we kind of send off to the client, and the crazy Ferrari guy, is like, yeah, I like this. It looks all right, but he's kind of concerned that the price looks weird. I mean, he doesn't want to have to parse that out. So what can we do about that? Well, fortunately for us, Angular has a concept called filters. And so what filters allows you to manipulate data in the view in a real easy way. So to kind of show you that, Angular has a built-in one called a currency. And so so there it is. So it made that change there, and this is all you have to do. So you put a pipe and then the currency filter. Okay, so we send it back to him, and yeah, he thinks that's nice and everything like that, but he's still not happy that the mileage doesn't have commas. He's a picky guy, so we gotta, he owns a Ferrari dealership. He's picky, so we kind of gotta be nice to him. Like, all right, man, we'll get you set up. We'll put some commas in there for you. So what do we do about that? Well, Angular, I think it does have a number filter, but then I couldn't show you how to make a custom filter, so we're not going to use that. We're going to use a filter called mileage that we're making. So let's take a look at how that's done. So here we are. We create a filter right here called mileage, and we return a function. That's it. And it takes the input, and then it runs a nasty regular expression on it, and then it replaces and puts commas. And there it is. Okay. All right. So it's starting to really come together. Without a lot of trouble here. But, seeing the first 25 cars is kind of, it's not cool. We want to see everything. So we have to implement pagination. So here's what that looks like, using, again, the Bootstrap. And then in our list template, we have another custom filter called range, and basically it goes through the current. I should stop and start over here. So we have to let the front end app, how many cars are there in the database, so we know how many pages to compute, right? And so we've created a new endpoint right here called total. And this endpoint needs to be before, the placement matters. It has to be before all these here. And the reason for that is if we had this right down here, then what would happen is if you passed in total, it would get caught up right here, and it would go to this method. So you have to put it up here. And it's very straightforward right here. So we're just computing the total of the array. Actually, there's nothing really to compute. If it exists, give us the total. We're going to send it down the wire as a JSON object, and then we get the total. So there's kind of a nasty filter here. Admittedly, I found this one from Stack Overflow that allows us to do these ranges as seen here. And then we want to add page count ability here. And we just add a few variables here. And then we use our new endpoint. And so now we're not using ng resource anymore. What we did, we decided we're going to inject the HTTP service, and we're going to call out directly to the cars total endpoint. And then we're going to get the page, and then we can display it, right? And so as we can see again right here, if you click, then it's going to call this method on the scope called load page. And that method is right here, and it's not currently implemented yet. So we will implement that. So pretty much this involves just a couple lines change here. Calling the query method again, this is part of ng service. And then we're passing in our offset and a limit to get the data set for the current page. That's why we do that. And so on the server, small change made right here. And so we call offset limit, and then we slice out the portion that we want for that particular page. And let's see. So I know kind of in your app, pagination. It's kind of lame. I mean, the cool thing to do now is when you get to the bottom of the screen, it just kind of loads more and more. And you can do that too in Angular pretty easily. So that's probably something you want to do. So this file, app.js on the client, has gotten pretty overwhelming now. We got a bunch of controllers stashed in here. And let's refactor that out. We got rid of the controllers, we just put them in controllers.js, that's it. So just about finished here, I want to touch on one final thing here, and that's the concept called directives. So again, this Bootstrap, all this stuff for Bootstrap is kind of messy. I mean, you don't want to have to type this over and over and over again. You want to follow the dry principle. Don't repeat yourself, right? And so Angular has a thing called directives that allow you to create your own HTML elements, your own HTML attributes, and a few other cool things. And you can attach behavior. You can do a lot of neat things with it. And again, like I said, that's why some people really hate Angular, but that's why a lot of people really love Angular. So let's see what that looks like. So now we've refactored it out. We've created a form field element here, and we've attached on a property, a label name, I guess. Maybe should call that label, and then we bind it to the model of these fields right here. And so we can see here, if it works. So let's see what this looks like. What does it take to create a directive? It's pretty straightforward, really. Well, it's not so straightforward. That's kind of a lie. So it's kind of straightforward. At least this particular example is sort of. So we see here's our directive called form field. We're going to restrict it to just an element. You could put in A for attribute, C for class. If someone were to put in like a form field class, then if you had a C here, then that behavior would take place in the form field class. Or you could even do it with comments if you wanted to if you're really into getting crazy with meta programming. And so in each directive, you typically want to create your own scope. And so what this does right here, it just kind of takes off the value, this @ symbol. It's a little terse, but you take off the value from here and then put it in here. and then we'll load it in here. I'll show this in just a second. And this equal means that whatever is on the ng model attribute, let me get rid of that. Whatever is on the ng model attribute right here, then we're going to create, the equal says, let's create a two-way binding layer. So whatever changes happen in the directive are going to be propagated up to the parent scope of the controller and vice versa on the other way. So some kind of neat functionality there. So formfield.html is our template there. And so you can see there's the prop value, and then here's what I'm using for data. Let me go right here real quick. And this does not have to be named data. You can name it whatever you want. I chose data. And so then we're filling in props. So this way we don't have to do a lot of typing. We can save ourselves some time with typing. So now what if you want to, you're saying like, well, JP, what if I want to change the way that the input looks? What if I don't want a text? What if I want a number? What if I want to go Bootstrap crazy and add a bunch of buttons and just make it look, out of this world? You can do that actually. And so ignore this for just a second here. So you can create, so we created form field 2, and we're using a concept called transclusion. Okay? It sounds very complex, but it's really not actually. So basically all transclusion does is it takes what's here and then it shoots it into the DOM for you. Okay? So it allows you to custom build your elements how you like. And so this stuff right here, I'm just showing how to create a template in HTML as well. So it doesn't have to be in a file. See, this file is actually empty. I should have just deleted it. But you can see here that you can create a template right here in your HTML, and then it'll use that. And then with transclusion, it'll put this code right here. Oops. That's a whole other issue, but okay, so select it. You can see it's all there. Let's see what that looks like real quick, and then we'll be finished with our app. So form field 2, and we pretty much just call the transclude equals true. This replace, it wasn't necessary. Basically what that does, on the DOM, you would see these form field elements. If you have replace, you're not going to see the form field element. It basically takes what's in the directive and it replaces that element in the DOM instead of making it a child of that element. So okay, we have our app. I've showed you how you can build a fully functional CRUD app in AngularJS in relatively little amount of code. And so we can send it off to our client now, and hopefully he'll be happy. So that's it. Do we have any questions?
So if you tell us to use that, just because I was interested before with the push state thing, you tell us to use HTML5, it won't degrade gracefully to IE?
No, I don't. Not that I'm aware of. No, it won't. Yeah. So you have to actually use the hash bang URLs if you want to support IE.
Okay, it won't automatically though if you tell it.
At least to my knowledge, I don't think it does. I don't think it does degrade gracefully, unfortunately. Actually, if you did want it to degrade gracefully, what you would do is on the server side. I mean, you're going to make round trips to the server every single time, so that might be kind of pointless. So yeah, so it doesn't. So another question over there?
Directives with large content or templates with large data, would you normally hide that before it actually gets binding, or would it show it and then swap to something?
That's a great question. I don't know, to be honest with you. I don't know. I don't know. I'm sorry, I don't know. I'll have to look into that though. That's a fantastic question. I don't know. I should have mentioned I'm still relatively new with Angular within the last couple months, so.
With the pagination, whatever, when you delete something, does it automatically like redo all that stuff for you? Or
Yes.
do you have to like code that in?
So if I were to delete something on this page, it would basically, what's on the client side the count would go from 25 to 24. It wouldn't actually pull down one more and then keep it at 25. you'd have to actually implement that in. But it would, if you delete something, it would refresh without you having to put in any additional code, so it would update this list page here, if that makes sense.
The supervisor, that's the server you're using for the development?
Good question. I should have made that clear. No, I'm technically using Node. I could just use Node server. Supervisor, all supervisor does is it puts a watch on the file system, and if there's any files that changes, then it restarts the server with the new changes. And so then the reload module, what that does is it notices that if it creates a WebSocket to the server, and so once that WebSocket connection breaks, then it says, okay, I'm going to set a timeout, I'm going to refresh in about 300 milliseconds or so, and that's how that works. So, other questions?
You said one of the complaints is that HTML will never validate because of the NG custom attributes. Is that?
Yeah, that's a good question too. No, to my knowledge, HTML5 it would not validate. Now you could, if you wanted to be completely valid HTML5, what you would do is you would create, if you were going to create directives, you would make them attributes, and then Angular out of the box supports the data/prefix. Yeah, so it out of the box supports that, so if you wanted to be 100% HTML5 valid, you could do that. So, and on that note of creating elements, if you're going to do that in Internet Explorer, you do have to actually, there's kind of a hack on an older Internet Explorer where you actually have to create the elements in JavaScript in advance before you start using custom elements. So,
Even like
what's that?
even for HTML5
Just in Internet Explorer, older Internet Explorer, that's all. I think 8 and less, I think is what it is. So, what's that?
Isn't that like a customized namespace, like you would
You can actually make namespaces if you want in Angular. Angular supports that. All you have to do is in your directive name, if you just created here, if I just did like cc-form field, then I could do cc: in HTML or cc- in HTML, either one, and it would work if you wanted to make it look like there was a namespace. So, if that kind of answers your question.
like an XML namespace, so with Internet Explorer validation.
That I don't know, honestly. I'm not, I don't know. Any other questions? Tor.
What are some things you just don't like about Angular?
I love Angular for everything. No, what I don't like, so it's a big framework. So if you're going to create a simple app, or you're going to modify an existing app, you probably don't want to use Angular. The documentation it's getting better, but there's still a lot of things where you're gonna spend a lot of time on Google Groups and Stack Overflow, just kind of trying to figure out how things work. But fortunately, every time that I've Googled for something with Angular, somebody else has already had that problem and it's came up before, and usually there's a solution. But they're very helpful in the Google Groups. So yeah.
What is Google using this for?
No, I don't. That's a great question. I know that developers, they work at Google, and I don't know if they built it in their spare 20% time. I don't know. But now it's officially sponsored by Google, but I don't know what they're using it for internally. Yeah, maybe you're right. Other questions? Is that it? Okay, thanks, guys.